What's up with the economy? And is it the president's fault that we had to pay more for things over the past 3.5 years? This is Natasha Alford for theGrio's Politics Explained. And this week we're looking at the #1 concern for voters in this election: what caused inflation? One of the questions that hit the hardest at the recent presidential debate was when the moderators asked about the economy under Biden and Harris.
And your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
Even though inflation is the lowest it's been since March 2021, many families are still remembering the struggle of things costing more. And even though Joe Biden has stepped aside so Kamala Harris can run for president, there are many voters specifically blaming her and Biden for us having to come up out of our pockets. But is the cost of goods actually something under the president's control? The answer is not really, although sometimes presidents can make a bad situation worse. But it may not be the president you're thinking of. Long before the pandemic ever happened, Donald Trump boasted about the U.S. economy under his leadership. He oversaw low unemployment numbers, rising stock markets, and solid economic growth. But much of it was gained from President Obama's administration. Look at this chart. You can see that unemployment was already dropping under Obama, and so was growth. But what Trump didn't brag about was the consequences of his engaging in trade wars with other countries by imposing tariffs. A tariff is just a tax you make another country pay for bringing goods into your country or taking them out. And because of Trump's tariffs, countries retaliated with their own tariffs, and some of these costs got passed down to consumers in the form of taxes. Trump's trade wars also disrupted supply chains. Supply chains are the ways that we get products. If you can't get a hold of the normal amount of items you sell, suddenly what you do have in stock becomes very valuable and the price skyrockets. But then the pandemic hit. You may recall that people couldn't go to work, which limited the labor supply. Travel was limited, and supply chains really got disrupted. Inflation went from warming up under Trump to on fire. But there's another theory of the cause of our recent inflation, and it's debated by economists and politicians alike: a surge of money that was given out. When Donald Trump signed the 2020 Bipartisan CARES Act, money went out to help people, but the influx of money meant suddenly people wanted to buy more things instead of going out and paying for services. That means demand went up as supplies were often limited, again causing prices to skyrocket. When Biden took over in 2021, the economy was in shambles. Democrats in Congress passed another round of stimulus checks, and Biden signed the bill. But warnings and concerns about more inflation got really loud from economists and politicians.
We've got an overheated economy, and the Fed's going to have the very real challenge of cooling that economy off.
Still, the Biden administration, thinking of lessons from past bailouts, say they were concerned about the danger of doing too little to boost the economy. For many Americans cashing those stimulus checks, inflation was the last thing they were thinking about when they went to the bank. Just ask Sexy Red. But when those prices started to rise more, you bet people were mad. And the president in charge was the first person to blame. It didn't matter that inflation was happening in other countries around the world too, due to post-COVID supply chain disruptions and the war on Ukraine, which helped raise food prices. Or that some companies had enjoyed so much record profit during COVID because of people spending that they kept prices higher long after they could have lowered them. People expected the president to fix inflation. It's part of a larger phenomenon where, despite having 3 branches of government that check and balance each other, presidents in the executive branch are sometimes seen as kings who can fix everything with the stroke of a pen. The same criticism happened in the 1970s under President Jimmy Carter. The 70s saw some of the worst inflation in modern American history, and Carter took an approach that upset many Americans when he gave his famous malaise speech, saying essentially, "Hey, can you make a sacrifice and buy less?" Carter lost the presidential election to Republican Ronald Reagan, with many voters expressing concern about the economy. The economy is a top reason George Bush #1 lost to Bill Clinton in the 1990s. Bush's issue wasn't so much inflation, but the recession that hit the 1990s and upset many voters. But since they were in office, did the Biden-Harris administration try to do anything about the problem of inflation? Yes, they did more than a few things. In 2022, Joe Biden authorized the opening up of oil reserves to bring down gas prices, something you only do when it's really urgent. He also signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which allowed the government to negotiate prices down on select medications that Americans were paying too much money for. Biden also worked to ease congestion at supply ports so products could actually get through to American consumers, thus paving the way for lower prices. And Biden backed the Federal Reserve's decision to raise interest rates, which hopefully slowed down spending. Will all of this be enough to make voters forget the inflation that they endured over the past 3.5 years when Harris is on the ballot next to Trump? We'll know after November. But Trump is promising to enact more tariffs on other countries, which economists warn will boost inflation. And Harris is promising an opportunity economy with support for new homeowners and tax breaks for middle and lower income Americans, although some economists have critiqued her promises to stop price gouging, debating how effective it actually will be. But maybe the lesson here isn't about which president does more to fix the economy or cool inflation on their watch. Maybe it's just about who tells the better story to the American people about what they did and what they will do. So tell us, Grio fam, what do you wish presidents would do to make living easier? And how are you, or how did you support yourself whenever times got tough? This is Natasha Alford for Politics Explained. Stick with theGrio for your latest election 2024 coverage.